Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Mention the name Colt Walker, and it brings up images of Josie Wales gunning down and standing alone against the bad guys. It brings up the idea of Texas Rangers facing Comanche charges. It's the image of that lone Texas Ranger out on the plains standing up against impossible odds. It's an iconic gun, and even people who really don't know anything about black powder probably know the name Walker. And today we look back on this gun as the cornerstone, the beginning of something. But I can assure you, at the time that it was created, that wasn't the case. At the time that the revolving handgun had come out, there'd been a gentleman that come up by the name of Collier that had created a gun that you cocked the hammer and then manually revolved the cylinder. This was a big innovation. Sam Walker had figured out how to, Sam Colt had figured out how to make it, when you cocked the hammer, it revolved and locked the cylinder automatically. This was a technological light year leap in technology. But it didn't sell well. The first gun that Colt came out with was called the Patterson, and by many accounts the only person that could really get it timed right where it worked properly and reliably was Sam Colt himself. They were finicky, they were fragile, and had a lot of parts, and they were difficult to maintain in the field. And yet Texas, fighting the Comanche Wars, the things that had happened after the Alamo days, needed firepower. And it was an engagement where a young Sam Walker witnessed firsthand what a firepower a handgun, revolving handgun, could be when he was in a fight where it was a bunch of Comanche and it was several Texas Rangers, each armed with a pair of Pattersons and several spare cylinders, and how it was a one-sided victory because of that firepower. Well, Sam Colt had not done too well. He had created the Patterson and also a revolving rifle and a revolving shotgun, and it just hadn't done that well, and he had folded shop. The business had failed. When Walker came to call and came to try to get Colt to go back into business and to create something. Now when you look at this gun, you're thinking handgun, big and powerful, and you are right. It was the most powerful handgun up until 1935. But I don't think that's what Walker was really going for. Now bear with me, this is my little 2 cents of it. I want you to look at this image. This is an 1839 Colt revolving carbine. Now notice the size of that cylinder, the loading lever, this big block right here. And then you think in a modern term like this. I want you to look at this a second. That's a 12 gauge shotgun with a pistol grip. That's a lot of firepower. What Walker wanted was a carbine in one hand. He's got one hand controlling a horse, and he needed the power of a carbine in the right hand. Thus, this great big cylinder, this great big strong block, this great big barrel. It's a one-handed carbine. Yes, it is a handgun, but he wanted the power of that revolving carbine in his hand, and thus this big, huge gun. It'd be like that pump shotgun. If you had a pump shotgun, let's say, pistol grip on horseback, that gun weighs 4 pounds empty. Loaded is close to 5. That pump weighs about the same. That gives you an idea. These guys were men that shot them. Walker went and got Colt, and Colt and he together came up with this design, and it would become the cornerstone. Now what Walker was part of was the U.S. mounted rifles, sometimes called dragoons. We think of cavalry. Strictly speaking, at that time, cavalry fought from horseback all the time. Dragoons rode to the battle on horseback and then got off and fought like infantry. So he wanted, think of it like a tank, fast to a point and then a lot of firepower. Cavalry used a lot of spears and sabers at this time and some single-shot handguns for get them off of me. Dragoons actually toted carbines and rifles. This gave them very, powerful handguns, carbines in one hand each that they could engage. Very powerful. When Colt had completed this, he had enough money in the bank. This led to a line of military arms called the Dragoons. The Whitneyville Walker comes right after this, and it's the transition. It's still got this cutout right here, square back trigger guard. There weren't many made. Then he went to the first model Dragoon, which had an improved barrel latch up here. We shortened the barrel down, we shortened the cylinder down a little bit. And then we had the second and third model Dragoon. By far the third model was the most produced. And they were carried all the way up to the Civil War to good effect. These were not designed to be carried on the hip. They rode on a horse saddle on a pair of holsters on either side of the pommel of the horse. Again, a one-handed carbine for cavalry use and etc. But by the Civil War, they had become kind of obsolete. And from this idea, you get the 1860 Army, the rebated cylinder, the firepower. They had reduced the chamber capacity down to where the standard load in a Dragoon was about 45 grains. When they made the 1860 Army, it was about 35 grains. They didn't lose a lot, especially in actual performance. And because of that, it made a much lighter, handier gun. This paved the way, though. But I want you now, when you look at a Walker, as much thinking as it's a big bow-hunking handgun, I want you to look at it and think one-handed carbine, that kind of power. At the time it was conceived, they didn't know it would lead to many, many revolutionary ideas. It was the really first truly functional and successful handgun. Yes, the Patterson came before, but it was, in reality, it was a prototype. They made a lot of them, but it was a prototype. The Walker kind of fixed that. And certainly by the third model Dragoon, you had the lock work that would go on and become the 60 Army, the single action Army, and the basis for most single action revolvers we have today. I hope this helps, guys. I hope it pointed out something you didn't know. I'm Blackie for Shamans 4 Woodscraft. Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.